Arizona Territory, 1879. The sun was already high when the outlaw gang dragged Tessa Mae Morrison off her horse, dust biting her cheeks, wrists burning from the rope. "Do not try to run again," the man with the scar across his neck growled, yanking her forward. "I would rather die than stay with you," she spat, eyes blazing. The gang laughed, a hard sound that echoed off the rocks rising around the canyon gulch. She had been taken 3 days earlier, snatched from the stagecoach outside Prescott. 2 men were shot dead. The driver's body had not even hit the ground before they grabbed her. They had plans for her. She knew the moment she saw the way one of them looked at her. Tessa hadn't cried. Not once. Not when they tied her hands. Not when they dragged her through the dirt. Not when they said what they meant to do. She'd held her chin up, blue eyes steady, the way her father had raised her. But now her hope was thinning. She sat by the fire that night, arms wrapped tight around herself, the desert cold settling in. The men laughed and passed around whiskey. One of them started to stand, coming toward her. Then something shifted. The wind changed. And from the dark edge of the rocks, a single arrow flew. It drove straight into the man's chest. He collapsed without a sound. Another arrow followed. Then another. Screams broke out. The campfire lit up, chaos, men scrambling, blood spilling. Horses shrieked and bolted. And in the middle of it all, he walked in. Tall, silent, swift. His eyes were fixed only on her. Ohan Lonetree. She had heard his name whispered in nearby towns like a warning. An Apache scout, once part of the U.S. Cavalry's hired scouts, turned his back on the army when they burned his people's winter camp. Since then, he had become something else entirely. He was known to show up when no one else would. He had followed her trail for 2 days, tracking the outlaws without rest. Tessa stared at him, unsure if he was real. He crossed the firelight and knelt beside her. "You are safe now," he said, cutting her hands free. She stared at him. "Who are you?" "Ohan. I am taking you home." There were still 2 men left alive, running. Ohan stood again, bow drawn, but Tessa grabbed his arm. "Please," she said, voice cracking. "Just get me out of here." He looked at her, then lowered his bow. They rode through the night. Ohan had brought 2 horses, knowing she might not be able to ride alone. But she did, stubborn, silent, her hands raw, her dress torn and dust-covered. They did not speak much. Not until morning, when they reached the edge of a canyon and she nearly collapsed from exhaustion. Ohan helped her down gently. His touch was careful, respectful. She sat on a flat rock, staring out at the wild stretch of land before them. "What will they do?" she asked. "The ones that got away? They will not come again," he said. Tessa looked at him then, really looked. His face was carved by wind and time, a scar across his cheekbone, dark eyes steady. He must have been close to 30, but his presence felt older. "Why did you come for me?" she asked. "Because no one else did." That almost broke her. Her throat tightened, but she said nothing. He handed her a canteen. She drank. They rested in the shade for 2 hours. Ohan built a small fire, warmed some jerky and beans. She ate without speaking. But when she finished, she looked over at him. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. "We will ride to my people. It is closer than Prescott. Safer." "Will they take me in?" "They will, because I will ask it." Tessa hesitated, then nodded. "All right." They rode again, this time slower. Her body ached, but something in her had started to feel different. Not safe. She was not ready to feel safe, but steadier. They camped that night near a creek. She watched him from across the fire. Ohan cleaned his knife with methodical focus. He was quiet, but not cold. He had not asked her anything about what had happened. He had not looked at her with pity or judgment. Instead, when she had flinched at a night noise, he had simply said, "Nothing comes near when I stand watch." And she had believed him. That night, under the stars, she said softly, "Do you have family?" He looked up. "No, not anymore." She nodded. "I lost my brother last year," she said. "He was killed in the war." Ohan's eyes rested on her, not with sadness, but understanding. "I am sorry." She gave a small breath, tired and grateful all at once. "You saved me," she said. He did not answer, but his eyes stayed on her until she looked away. The next day, they neared the edge of his people's land. A boy on horseback spotted them and rode off to tell the others. When they arrived, an older woman came out first. Ohan spoke to her softly in Apache. The woman looked at Tessa, then nodded. She was given a place to rest, warm water to clean up, food. Ohan stayed near. Not too near, but always in sight. At dusk, she stepped outside the lodge where she was staying. Ohan was tending the horses. "Will you stay here long?" she asked. He looked up. "As long as you need." She nodded. Something about that made her chest ache in a different way. Later, when she sat alone beside the fire behind the lodge, he came to sit beside her. The wind was soft. "Do you think I will be all right?" she asked. Ohan looked at her, long and steady. "I know you will." She turned her head. "I do not even know what to say to you," she whispered. "You gave me back my life." He reached out, his hand brushing hers lightly. "You do not need to say anything." But she did not pull her hand away. And he did not let go. They sat like that, close but still, until the fire burned low. And for the first time since that day on the stagecoach, Tessa let herself breathe without fear. With Ohan beside her, she believed she could. By the fourth morning, the swelling in Tessa's wrists had eased. She hadn't asked for anything, but the old woman had wrapped them in a paste of crushed desert herbs and bandaged them with soft linen. The skin still bore the rope's memory, but the sting had dulled. She woke early, tucked beneath a wool blanket that smelled faintly of smoke and dry sage. The lodge was quiet but not lifeless. Somewhere beyond, she heard the steady rhythm of a pestle in a bowl. Outside, the air was cool and held the scent of dust and mesquite. When she stepped out, the sky was pale with dawn. Ohan was crouched beside a low corral, speaking quietly to a broad-chested bay mare. He did not look up even when she approached. "You talk to them," she said. He brushed the mare's flank, his voice even. "They listen better than most men." She folded her arms, watching the way the horse leaned into his hand. "Is she yours?" "No. She belongs to the family I stayed with when I was young. I trained her." Tessa shifted her weight to her good ankle. "You said you didn't have family." He rose slowly, wiping his palms on his trousers. "Not by blood. But some bonds are made from what you survive, not what you're born to." She nodded, unsure how to answer that. The morning wind lifted a strand of her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear. "I want to help," she said. "I'm not good at sitting still." Ohan considered her for a long moment. "There's a woman who gathers wild onion and prickly pear. She could use one more set of hands." Tessa hesitated. "Would she want me there?" "She'll decide that when she sees how you work." By midday, her fingernails were packed with grit and her palms stained green. The woman, Naali, didn't speak English, but she pointed with firm hands and corrected Tessa's clumsy efforts with a tap or a shake of the head. They worked in silence, crouched over dry creek beds and stony hillsides, filling woven baskets and laying the roots out to dry. When the sun reached its height, Naali offered her a strip of smoked fish and a small gourd of cooled tea. Tessa nodded her thanks, breath short from the heat. Ohan found her near the riverbank that evening, scrubbing her arms with a flat stone. He didn't call out, only made his presence known by stepping on a patch of dry twigs. She glanced over her shoulder. "I stink like dirt and onions." He crouched near the water, cupping it in his hands and rinsing his face. "Then you're doing it right." She laughed once, short and surprised. "Naali didn't throw me out." "That's something. She sent word you listened more than you talked." "I didn't know how to say anything anyway." He sat back on his heels, letting the breeze cool the water on his skin. "You'll learn." She looked at the river, watching how the current pulled around a fallen branch. "I never planned to stay in Arizona," she said. "I was headed to San Francisco. My aunt lives there, runs a boarding house. I was going to help her keep books and maybe start a small school." Ohan said nothing. Feels like that was another woman. One who didn't know what it meant to run out of choices. He shifted, arms resting on his knees. "Maybe she's still there, just waiting for you to catch up." "I'm not sure I want to anymore." He didn't press her. Instead, he pulled a small piece of leather from his coat pocket and handed it to her. It was a strip of tanned hide, tied with a red bead in the center. "What's this?" "Naali made it. For strength." Tessa turned it over in her hands, the bead smooth beneath her thumb. "She doesn't even know me." "She knows enough." She looked at him, something tight in her chest loosening. You trust her. I trust those who have lived through fire and still choose to plant things. That night, they ate beside a low fire built between two rocks. Naali sat nearby, humming as she peeled cactus fruit with a hooked knife. The stars came out one by one, pinpricks above the dark ridges to the east. Tessa leaned forward, elbows on her knees. When you found me, she said, how did you know where to look? Ohan stirred the coals with a stick. The men who took you, they weren't careful. They left broken branches, boot prints, ashes that hadn't cooled. She traced the rim of her tin cup. You tracked them alone? There wasn't time to gather others. I had to move fast. You could have died. He didn't answer right away. Then, that wouldn't have helped you. She studied his face, the firelight catching the line of his jaw, the places where hardship had left its mark. But there was steadiness there too, something rooted deeper than pain. You didn't even know my name. I didn't need it. She set the cup down and stood, brushing off her skirt. Good night, Ohan. He tilted his head slightly. Sleep well, Tessa. She walked back toward the lodge, the ground cool beneath her feet. Inside, she lay looking at the roof beams, the smell of cedar lingering in the air. Her body ached from the day's work, but it was a clean ache earned. She closed her eyes, the red beads still clutched in her palm. And for the first time since Prescott, the dreams that came were quiet. On the seventh day, Tessa followed Ohan beyond the low ridgeline where the juniper gave way to open rock. The morning was overcast, the sky a muted silver that made the land seem wider, quieter. They walked without speaking, their boots brushing loose shale, the heat of the sun still waiting behind clouds. When they reached a narrow plateau, Ohan paused and pointed ahead. A cluster of yucca bloomed there, their tall stalks heavy with white flowers. Beyond them, the canyon opened wide, revealing a winding stretch of river far below. This is where I used to come with my uncle, Ohan said, his voice low. He taught me to hunt javelina along these cliffs. Tessa stepped beside him, her gaze sweeping across the land. It's beautiful. He nodded, then crouched to tie off a narrow strip of rawhide around a young mesquite. He said the wind here could carry your thoughts straight to the spirits if they were listening. She crouched too, resting her hands on her knees. Did you come here after? She hesitated, unsure how to finish. He looked at her, eyes calm. After the winter raid? Yes. I buried something here. He stood, brushing off his hands. She rose too, not pressing him. Instead, she watched a hawk glide far above, its shape cutting slow circles through the pale light. They sat beneath a cottonwood at the canyon's edge. Ohan pulled a small satchel from his belt, unwrapping a folded cloth inside. He handed her half a flatbread, still warm from the lodge hearth. She tore a piece and chewed slowly, the silence between them easy. After a while, she turned to him. Why haven't you gone back to the army? His jaw shifted slightly as he swallowed. I did what they asked. Then I watched them break every promise they made. Tessa looked down at her lap. You could have disappeared, gone where no one would have found you. I tried, but I kept hearing about women taken, families cut down on the road, no one following the trails. So I did. She leaned forward, elbows on her thighs. You still believe in justice? I believe in balance. The sun began to burn through the clouds, casting soft light across the stone. A breeze stirred the cottonwood leaves, and Tessa let herself close her eyes for a moment. When I was 16, I tried to run away, she said. Ohan turned toward her, saying nothing. My father had promised me to a man twice my age. A rancher outside Abilene, lost 2 wives already. I packed a bag and took my brother's old gelding. I got as far as a rail station in Wichita before a conductor sent word back to my family. Did they punish you? No. But they married me off the next season to a man who drank through every Sunday service. He died 2 years later of fever. After that, I told myself I'd never belong to anyone again. She glanced over, expecting comment, maybe judgment. But Ohan only watched her, steady as ever. You chose your own path, he said. I thought I had. Then those men, she stopped, jaw tightening. They didn't just take me. They tried to take that from me too. He didn't touch her, didn't shift closer. But his voice was firm. They did not succeed. A long silence stretched between them. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of sage from the valley below. "I keep trying to figure out what to do now," she said. "I can't go back to being someone's burden. I don't want charity." Ohan looked toward the river. "Naali said you work hard. That you're quiet, but you don't flinch from anything." Tessa gave a faint, dry laugh. "She sees more than most do. She sees truth," he said. "You have a place here if you want it." She turned to him. "And you?" "I'll be here." Her throat tightened, but she managed a slow breath. "If I stay, it won't be because I'm hiding. I know." They sat until the sky turned gold behind the cliffs, the light catching in Ohan's hair, deepening the lines at the corners of his eyes. As they started back, Tessa walked beside him in silence, their steps in rhythm. At the base of the ridge, he offered his hand to help her down a steep patch. She took it, her fingers fitting easily into his. When they reached the lodge, she turned to him before stepping inside. "I don't need saving anymore." His eyes met hers. "Good." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, without another word, she stepped through the door. Inside, the air was warm, the hearth glowing low. She sat on her bedroll, unwrapping a bundle Naali had left. Dried squash, a wedge of cornbread, and a small bundle of lavender tied with string. She set it by her sleeping mat and lay down, the scent rising softly around her. Outside, she could hear the faint sound of Ohan's footsteps as he walked past her window toward the river. She closed her eyes. And this time, sleep came easy. The rains came late that spring, soft and infrequent, but enough to wake the scent of creosote and coax green into the narrow gullies around the village. Tessa had taken to rising before first light, slipping from the lodge while the sky was still slate-colored and quiet. She liked to walk the southern trail where the ground held fewer rocks and the rabbits darted through the sagebrush. That morning, she found Ohan already there, sitting on a flat stone with his hands resting on his thighs. His bow leaned against a yucca stalk nearby, and a shallow groove in the dirt showed where he'd been tracking something earlier. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, slowing her steps. "You didn't." She sat a few paces away, cross-legged, her skirts catching around her ankles. The wind carried a faint trace of juniper and wet dust. "You always come here before the village wakes?" "Most days." She brushed grit from her palm. "What do you listen for?" He glanced toward the ridgeline. "Changes." She nodded slowly, looking out where the land dipped and rose in long, quiet folds. "I've been thinking about teaching again," she said. "There are 2 children here who speak both English and Apache. One of the grandmothers asked if I would help them read letters left behind by their father." Ohan's eyes met hers. "You should." "I want to, but I don't want to make a mess of things." "You won't." She drew her knees up. "I've never stayed anywhere longer than a season since I left Kansas. I'm not sure what it means to put down real roots." Ohan picked up a small, round stone and turned it in his fingers. "Roots don't ask permission. They grow where the ground holds them." She watched his hands. "Have you ever thought about leaving Arizona?" "No," he said, "but I've thought about what it would take to stay." She turned toward him fully, the hem of her sleeve brushing dry grass. "What would it take?" He set the stone down carefully. "Someone who sees the land the way I do. Someone who doesn't need a place to be whole, but chooses it anyway." Tessa's breath caught, but she didn't look away. "I've never had anyone say something like that to me." He studied her face. "You've had people say other things." "I know." She swallowed. "I used to think survival was enough. But lately I've been waking up before the sun, and I don't feel hollow anymore." Ohan stood and held out his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Their palms stayed pressed, fingers fitting with a quiet certainty. They walked back slowly, not speaking, but not needing to. That afternoon, she sat with the 2 children under a cottonwood near the creek. They spread out paper and charcoal, shaping letters slowly, dipping the tips of their fingers in water to smooth the lines. Tessa corrected gently, letting them sound out the words in their own rhythm. When they laughed, she laughed with them. Ohan passed by once, carrying a bundle of firewood. He didn't stop, but his eyes met hers and something passed between them, a shared knowing, anchored and quiet. That evening, Tessa helped Naali grind cornmeal in the outer circle of the hearth. Her arms ached from the motion, but it was a clean ache, one earned by choice, not necessity. After the meal, she stepped outside into the cooling dark. Ohan waited near the eastern edge of the village where the land sloped toward the canyon. She joined him without speaking. From his belt, he drew out a folded square of rough cloth. Inside it lay a carved pendant strung on leather, a small, dark stone set into polished wood shaped like a seed. He held it out. "For you." She ran her fingers over it. "What does it mean?" He looked at her steadily. "That I see you." Her chest tightened. She tied it around her neck, the pendant settling just below her collarbone. "I see you too," she said. He stepped forward, not abruptly, but with the steadiness she had come to understand as his way. When he touched her cheek, it was with his palm open, not taking but offering. She leaned into it. And then they kissed slow, without urgency, a meeting of breath and warmth and quiet resolve. Not to forget what had come before, but to name something new. When they parted, neither stepped back. Tessa rested her forehead against his. "I'm not afraid anymore." Ohan's voice was low. "You don't have to be." The wind moved around them, carrying the scent of sage and new rain. Behind them, the village lights flickered soft against the dusk. And in that stillness, Tessa knew she was no longer surviving. She was living. The sun stood high the day Tessa walked the narrow path east of the village. A woven basket balanced against her hip. The desert was blooming in quiet ways, pale yellow blossoms on brittlebrush, tiny white clusters along the base of the rocks. She moved with purpose, pausing now and again to collect the herbs Naali had asked for, her fingers deft and sure. Behind her, footprints marked the soft earth, a second set beside hers. Ohan walked slightly behind and to her right, carrying a bundle of cedar branches. Their steps were unhurried. They'd started taking these walks every few days, sometimes for gathering, sometimes for the quiet. Today was both. "There's a place I'd like to show you," he said, lifting his chin toward a rise ahead. Tessa nodded. "Is it far?" "Not far, but it's steep." She adjusted the basket on her hip and followed. They climbed without speaking, the wind carrying only the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. At the crest, the land fell away into a shallow basin ringed with boulders, the floor below scattered with low-growing plants and a few wild fig trees. A narrow spring shimmered in the middle, half hidden by reeds. Tessa stepped forward, taking it in. "It's quiet here. No one comes," Ohan said. "Used to be a healing place long ago, before soldiers drove the people from the lower ridges." She knelt beside the water, dipping her fingers in the cool stream. "You kept it safe." "I remembered where it was," he said. "That's enough." They stayed until the light softened, the shadows of the trees stretching long over the basin. Ohan showed her how to strip bark from a fig branch for binding, and she taught him how to twist wild mint into knots so it dried without crumbling. On the walk back, he asked, "Would you want to build something here?" Tessa looked up. "You mean a shelter? Something more permanent? A home?" She stopped walking. "You mean, for us?" He faced her fully, no hesitation in the line of his shoulders. "If you'd want it." Tessa held his gaze for a long moment. "I've never built anything that couldn't be packed up by morning. We could build it together." She smiled, then not as something blooming suddenly, but as something that had been growing quietly and finally reached the surface. "When it's finished," she said, "I want a place for books. And a wide porch." "I'll shape the beams," he answered. "You can fill the shelves." They returned to the village with a shared understanding, one neither named nor needed to. The next morning, Tessa spoke to Naali about gathering stone and clay. Word spread, and by dusk, 3 men had offered to help with the foundation. Work began quietly. They cleared the flat space above the spring, laying out a rectangle with branches and rope. Ohan shaped the walls from packed mud and timber. Tessa smoothed the interior with a wide paddle she'd carved herself. Children from the village brought pebbles for the floor's edge, and Naali contributed a small pot already blackened from years of use. They worked through the days without ceremony. At night, they returned to the lodge, tired but content. When the walls stood shoulder-high, Tessa painted a thin red line along the inside, marking where the light first touched in the morning. The roof came last, thatched with reeds from the spring and cedar from the canyon's edge. On the final day, as the sun dipped low, Ohan stood beside her in the doorway, quietly watching the wind lift the edges of the thatch. "This is yours now," he said. "Ours," she corrected. He turned to her. "You're sure?" Tessa took his hand, her fingers closing over his. "I've never been more sure." That night, she didn't return to the lodge. They lay beneath the new roof, the scent of earth and cedar thick in the air. Tessa's head rested against his shoulder, her hand tucked beneath his. "I used to wonder what it would feel like," she said. "To stop running." Ohan kissed her temple. "Now you know." They slept with the door open to the stars. Seasons passed. Spring folded into the heat of summer, and with it came slow, steady changes. Tessa taught 4 children now. They met beneath the fig trees, where she'd hung a square of canvas to soften the sun. Ohan hunted less often, spending more days tending to the land around their home, repairing the fence, shaping tools, planting small rows of beans along the creek bed. One evening, he returned from the canyon with a carved cradleboard strapped to his back. Tessa raised an eyebrow, setting aside the book she'd been transcribing. "Something you want to tell me?" He set it down gently. "Only that I'm ready when you are." She crossed the room, touching the smooth wood. "I never thought I'd want a child." "You don't have to." "I do," she said. "Because it would be ours." He reached for her then, and she let herself lean into the space that had become her home. Years later, when the rains came heavier and the wild figs grew thick, Tessa stood on the porch of their house with a child balanced on her hip. Dark-haired, steady-eyed. Ohan stood nearby, shaping a new bowstring with careful fingers. The child reached one hand toward the trees. "She wants to walk there," Tessa said. "Then we'll walk with her," he answered. And they did. Together. Always.